Women's lead campus protests, men outperform in civic literacy. So women are just like those New York protesters we covered a few weeks ago, where they were at a protest and they couldn't even answer what they were there for. Men, on the other hand, they actually understand these things, and that's probably why they're not leading as many protests. They intellectually learn and understand these topics as opposed to reacting to them on emotion. So men and women are increasingly diverging politically, a notably pronounced trend on college campuses. College-age men, a shrinking demographic. I wonder why. Maybe it's because men are starting to realize that not only do colleges hate them, but they're also a waste of resources. Have become more conservative, while college-age women moved into the liberal camp. Young women are more likely than their male counterparts to vote, care about political issues, and participate in social movements and protests. Of course, you look at the recent spring protests related to the pro-Hamas protests, often had women leading the charge. Women were at the center of hunger strikes and public statements that were divorced from facts and established truths. Yeah. Meanwhile, the men who actually understand the situation weren't out there protesting. I'm sure it's a coincidence. So many of those leading the protest know very little about what they are protesting. They're protesting. I mean, they may not know what they are protesting, but they know why. It's all a virtue signal. Look at me, guys. I'm such a good person standing up for these oppressed people. Praise me. That's why they do it. A June current year survey of over 3,000 college and university students from the American Council of Trustees and Alumni reviews the extent of this collegiate ignorance. Female students, who are more often on the front lines of protests, are far less in tune with America's history and political system than young men. Regarding specifics, detailed knowledge about key political figures and actors, the gender differences are substantial. For example, only 35% of students today can correctly name Congressman Mike Johnson of Louisiana as the current Speaker of the House of Representatives. There is a 14-point gap between men and women, with 43% of men and 29% of women knowing the correct answer. Similarly, only 37% of students correctly identify John Roberts as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Everyone who listens to me should know all about that cuck. Yeah, little known fact, he was the inspiration for Cuckold Simulator. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is in my head canon. So here the gender gap widens to 16 points, with 47% of men and 31% of women correctly naming Roberts. This is notable given the increased visibility of the high courts to younger people after the current year -2 ruling in the Dobbs v. Jackson abortion case, which returned the question of abortion to the individual states, triggering substantial engagement from various women's organizations. Yeah, again, just protesting for protesting's sake. Gender differences sadly persisted based on theoretical understandings of American history and institutions. Well, it's going to be across the board, you know? Like, what were you expecting that there's going to be one or two subjects that women will just magically be more knowledgeable on all of a sudden? No, it's not going to happen. Maybe a few individual ones, but as a group, not so much. For instance, a few students could recall the terms of members of Congress. The ACTA data revealed just 40% of students correctly know the Senate terms are 6 years and House of Representatives are 2 years. Roughly 48% of men knew the correct answer, just 36% of women's, a 12-point difference. Yeah, but those women's are out there, they're fighting the good fight for the little guy. That's more important than knowing things. The fact that you're fighting is way more important than knowing why you're fighting. The disparity between collegiate men and women persists in several essential American civic questions. For example, when asked which branch of the government has the power to declare war, 42% of men knew the correct answer compared to only 26% of women's. Yeah, that would be the legislative branch. I bet they thought it was the executive, huh? Yeah, because, I mean, technically the president can mobilize troops, but I think the rule is that they could only stay mobilized for, I think it was either 30 or 60 days. And then in order to stay there, they actually need Congress to officially declare the war. Yeah, it's I could see why some people might get confused by that, like just given the number of times we've like the president has declared troops or moved troops. without declaring war. But anyway, that's just technicalities. Forget that shit. Similarly, around 40% of men correctly stated that the U.S. Senate holds a trial over impeachment. Only 28% of women knew this. Maybe if they watched any of the impeachment trials over the past few years, they'd know. But they only absorbed the misinformation fed to them by the media, it seems. So many women in the survey mistakenly believe the impeachment trials occurred in the Supreme Court. Given the recent impeachments of Orange Man in current year -5 and -3, the frequent cost to impeach presidents, it's concerning that so many students lack the understanding of the actual process. But they have the ability to go out there and be boots on the ground and make a difference and be good persons. The ACTA survey disturbingly reveals the gap in civic understanding between men and women. And of course, the survey results do not apply to all women's. Yeah, got to have that mandatory hashtag not all. So therefore, the survey cannot or should not be used to make rash generalizations. Yep, instead of using this survey results, you use your own observations. You use what your own lying eyes tell you. So, however, it would be unwise to ignore a growing gender gap on our campuses nationwide and the genuine implications of how men and women differ. But I was told men and women are the same. There's no difference. The fact that there are more women on campus today and the protests have been feminized, with women taking the lead in political action. So this is a sharp change in the past cases of mass student movements where men tended to dominate campus unrest in the past. Yeah, and notice that a lot of the protests of the past, they were actually protesting for things of value in some way. Yeah, not anymore. Like now they protest just as empty virtue signals. So as a professor who regularly deals with protesters and angry students making demands, it has become painfully clear that those most judgmental are also the least knowledgeable about the history and realities of political life and public policy. Some comedian said this ages ago. I think it may have even been George Carlin. Maybe you guys can remember. That like closed-minded people are like long-necked bottles. The less they have in them, the more noise they make pouring it out. And yeah, that has been true throughout my whole life. I've noticed that. As said, students are more often than not women's. They are diverging from men in political behavior and civic understanding, perhaps because they can be swayed by emotional appeals more easily than men, as was the case with the anti-Israeli protests. No, that is absolutely true. They are a whole lot easier to emotionally manipulate, and it shows. So activist and ignorant students, say no need for the redundancy there, pose a real problem for genuine education and civility on and off campus as students enter the real world. We ignore this reality at our peril. Our indoctrination system and local communities have failed to teach students our history and an accurate understanding of civics. Not for lack of trying. I still think that every freaking elementary, middle, and high school still goes over these topics. It's just that no one is expected to remember them after they take their final exam. Now, all right, final exam's done. Now I never need to use, and I never need any of this information again, which puts our republic in danger. Now, see, this is good. You could tell these guys are smart. If this article was written by some dumb far leftist, they would have said it puts our democracy in danger. No, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. I'm glad there's people out there with enough civic knowledge to understand that. It's getting rarer and rarer, though. So the rise of DEI principles, along with powerful feminazi ideology on campus, has radically changed our indoctrination priorities and the very substance and nature of our indoctrination. So our students are profoundly uninformed, though opinionated. No, that's by design. If they were informed, they wouldn't be activists for these stupid causes. So they are intentionally being kept angry and ignorant so they could be used as puppets. So rather than learn about how democracy functions, many just defaults to protest and calls for the destruction of our institutions, all in the name of saving our democracy. So this can and must change with a fundamental civics education for all students. I disagree. The education is already there. I'm quite sure that every major school segment, yeah, elementary, middle, and high school, you go through at least one class where they teach this stuff. It's just that no one's expected to remember it, and I don't really blame them because I'm quite sure I've been out of college for a long time. It's been, yeah, it's well over a decade since I last set foot inside of a college. If you were to quiz me on some of these questions that college students have to memorize and be tested on a semesterly basis, I don't know if I would pass many of these tests. Simply because, like, if I have no need for that knowledge, I just forget it. Like, if it's not something that pertains to my day to day life, or I don't have a personal interest in it, I'll admit there are a lot of things like I forget. Like, I could not tell you the exact years the Civil War took place off the top of my head. Like, I literally do not know the dates anymore because I have never, like, ever since I left school, I've never been in a situation where I needed to regurgitate the date the Civil War took place from memory. Like, that's one of those things where like, yeah, I couldn't answer that question now. But it's just because, like, I haven't needed that info for over a decade, so I just kind of forget about it.